Welcome. You are about to take a journey to a place of the divine love within with Deborah Beauvais on the Love by Intuition show. For the next hour, allow her to prepare you in becoming a magnet for a profound love-infused relationship by identifying and focusing on solutions through love. Awaken the light within and let your essence shine. And now, here's Deborah Beauvais on Love by Intuition, all part of the Dream Vision 7 radio network.
Welcome, everyone. Bonjour, mes amis. And yes, here I am, Deborah Beauvais, founder and owner of the syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network. We're in our 17th year, which is exciting. And if you're not familiar with us, we are a Boston-based internet radio station with all the bells and whistles where you can listen to us anywhere in the world. You can listen in the car. You can ask Alexa. You can choose any kind of podcast platform, and we're there. So we are everywhere. And my guest this evening, what has happened is I was listening to one of our other shows by Kelly Reinhardt, and her show is Make Mental Health Matter. And I was listening to her show, and Dr. B was on, and I was just taken by her journey and what she has been through. So we are going to be talking about grief in a way that really opens people's hearts and minds because, unfortunately, and you've heard me say this before, grief isn't something that everyone wants to talk about. They want to push it away. They don't know what to say, so they just don't want to go there. And a lot of the victims, a lot of us may push the pain away so that we can function and do the things that we are our day-to-day responsibilities. So I have invited Dr. B to the show, and I'm very honored to have her. We're going to be talking about potential lessons in justice and grief, and it's Dr. Cristi Bundukamara, if I'm pronouncing that anywhere
thank
close.
You. Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And so Dr. Cristi, Dr. B, is actually a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and she started out as an Army medic, and then went on to her education. She ended up with a PhD in education, and she has such a revenue of experience personally, because what has happened is 3 of her 7 children have passed, and recently her husband passed as well. I can't even fathom all of that loss. Most people know that my husband passed years back, and he was everything. I went from a tumultuous marriage, violent marriage, to have him, and but I had him for 17 glorious years. So we're going to. So I have a. I can't compare. And then, so let's just go right into it. Dr. B.
Yeah.
Relationship. Go right ahead.
Yeah, well, I think, just each of the listeners taking a moment to think about their own grief. And sometimes when you hear my story, you were kind of maybe minimizing your own pain because it just, mine seems unbearable. And the reality is wherever we are, whatever our losses are, we need to feel that pain, and we need to feel to heal. I talk about all the time. You have to feel that pain in order to heal. Unfortunately, I'm an expert in that, and still feeling that pain on a regular basis, and that's okay. We talk about grief as normal. A lot of the grief theories relate it to being normal, but when you lose a child, lose a husband early in life, lose a sibling, like those things are more like traumatic grief. And being able to know how do you actually process that type of grief if you haven't even learned as a culture how to process quote unquote normal grief.
Right. Right. You're so right. And we're always talking about go to the issue, go to the pain, run to it, don't run away from it, because as we know, if we do that, it just keeps bubbling up and it gets larger and more challenging to deal with and function at the same time. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about with your, how do you cope? How do you soothe yourself? The pain, I've all that you've experienced, how do you even get up in the morning? And I'm sure you have days where you don't get up in the morning, but share that. What were because it's a
I'd
shock.
like to first differentiate coping and healing.
Yes.
Coping is what you do in order to, get up and go to work. Let's say you are having a bad day and you wake up depressed, and, coping skills are the practical things that you use to say, you know what, I don't want to stay home from work today. I need to go to work. I'm going to, take a hot shower. I'm going to, have my coffee. I'm going to do some sort of coping thing to get through my day. Healing is very different. Healing, like I said, you have to feel in order to heal. When you experience grief, especially at the intensity of losing a child or husband, your brain becomes like chaos, and you have to learn how to organize those things, because grief enmeshes with a lot of other things. I can give you a perfect example. My grief for my child who lived a very traumatic life. He was diagnosed with catastrophic epilepsy at age 6. He was, they later found it to be a neurodegenerative condition. He was in and out of the hospital for 10 years of medical trauma for 10 years. And when you think about his life and the things that we went through with him, if you keep replaying all of that trauma, that's trauma, not grief. Grief is the loss of the different losses that you had along the way. And when you grieve something, the end result should be to cherish it, cherish that relationship. So when I'm in a good place, I can say with absolute confidence that I would, if God came to me before having children and said, you are going to have these children and they are going to die, do you want these children? And I would say yes. That is grief. That is like you're grieving the loss of the person, but you're cherishing the fact that you got to be their mother, right?
Right. You had the gift.
Yeah, and you learn how to separate the trauma. My son's life was traumatic, where my daughter's death was traumatic, and being able to separate the grief from the trauma so that I can cherish that relationship. But then you also need to deal with the trauma and the negative self-talk. Oftentimes I hear mothers that have lost a child, the guilt, what they should have done, just the negative things that play in your head, that's negative self-talk. That's not grief. But it gets enmeshed with the grief when we don't know how to organize this chaos that happens in our brain when something, horrible happens to us.
Right, right. So I wanted to ask, and maybe, but I'm going to ask it now. With each loss that you've had, how have you, you must have been angry at God. You must have been on your knees wondering why you, and then having to be able to deal with it time again and time again, each one special, because each relationship, each child is special. How, does it all get boxed in together, or do you have your separate grief for each family member?
I have been able to separate my grief, and I think that is important.
Yes.
My first major loss was my son in a drowning accident in 2005. And my kids were young. And I did what I think a lot of mothers do, is they just push on. I got counseling for my daughters, but I didn't do anything for myself. Shortly after that is when my son started having catastrophic epilepsy, so I was in fight or flight. I didn't have time to grieve that. And so this 10 years of medical trauma ended in my son's death in 2016. And during the whole 10 years of his trauma, I was praying. I believed that God was going to heal him if I just had enough faith. I was very, quote unquote, good, in the, like, if you just do what God says, then, these blessings will come onto you. And when my son died in 2016, it created a huge spiritual conflict of what I believed God was and what I was experiencing in my life. And at that point, my daughter was a year younger. She was 16. She was not sick, although she had the same disorder. She had never been hospitalized. She responded to medication. Her life was not traumatic. And so I thought, for sure, I have 20-plus years with her, even though she does have a neurodegenerative condition. And I remember the first time that Reggie, my son who passed, spoke to me. And he said, "Mama, you think you're so smart. You have no idea. I'm okay." With this insinuation of this eternal contentment that my son was experiencing. And at that time, I kind of rationalized it within my personal doctrinal beliefs, and I took it as a gift, but I didn't really hone in on those things. And I just, I started Mentally Strong. I have this, huge clinic. I started a YouTube channel. I do all this teaching. And so I was finding purpose in this pain of losing my son. My daughter's death was traumatic for me. One, it should not have happened. Like she was not sick. And she died in her sleep of sudden unexpected death and epilepsy. And that is when the anger at God was like off the charts. Like it's this, it was past just, and I really had to wrestle with God and kind of get into a space of really knowing Him. And I use the word God and I use the word Him just because that's what I've always used. But I've also realized that this entity that I call God is for everyone, and it's not, this specific way in which I was taught.
Right.
And that really happened in my daughter's death. And I now personally have connections with both of my children and my husband in their passing. They come to me, I can talk to them, and there's this eternal relationship. And I've talked about this for a long time. Relationships are so important because they are the only thing that's eternal. And in grief, we feel this physical separation. But one of the first things that Maya said to me, which is my daughter that passed in her sleep, was that time and space is not real, and that it's a human limitation. And when we feel disconnected from those that have passed, it's because of our human limitation. It's not because they're not actually there, right? And this eternal relationship, and I've been able to experience that, and I think that is crucial in losing a child, because of especially for women. I know that there's fathers who feel lost as well, but there's a physical connection between a mother and a child through the oxytocin and the placenta, coming directly from the mother, and pieces of that placenta staying in the mother for generations. There is a physical severing that happens when you lose a child. And so when I was studying lots of grief theories, I learned that in the attachment theory of grief, which I really did enjoy. We talk about the Kubler-Ross theory all the time, but that theory is not accurate. When it was not written for people who are experiencing grief. It was written for people who are dying, that were in hospice. And, most people don't know that. We teach, about the Kubler-Ross as if it's, these stages. And I don't think that grief changes you. And acknowledging that you are now a different person. Like you said, you lost your husband. Like this word widow, when I first got called a widow, I was like, oh, yeah, that's who I am now. Like it is a part of my identity. And we are changed because of those griefs, but we can grow around them. We don't have to. I think oftentimes when people have such a huge loss, it all gets enmeshed with other mental health symptoms. They end up with, pretty significant depression and anxiety, and it all kinds of gets enmeshed with grief. And it is the catalyst was grief, but there's lots of things around that we can work through, and we do have to feel the pain of grief.
Beautiful. Yes, I agree. And so you have come, I have to ask, you have come from to a place knowing that we are all eternal. And I believe that we choose to be on earth for however long we are. And it's a gift to have, as horrendous as it can be, you do come to a place of being in gratitude for the time that you have. But it takes a very long time to even be able to be comfortable saying that. And I imagine you did too. And so for some people that live in that fear that God did this, God did that, I really would like to say that, well, that's not true. We have our time, and then we're all going to go. We're all going to go back to the light. However you believe in that, we're all going to go back. And we may be in another lifetime. Who knows? But with all that said, and even with the beautiful messages we receive and everything, if you're tuned into it, and I'm sure that you have, like you said, you've been connected and talking with your loved ones, it's still hard because they're not here in the physical sharing your day-to-day life like you're used to. So that's the piece that I think many people struggle with, because you can have such phenomenal messages, whether in dreams or that they're physically here. They're physically here seeing you, but we may not be, vibrating at a high enough frequency to actually see them, but we can feel them and we can hear their messages. So knowing all that, does that bring you some level of peace?
Yes, absolutely. It brings me to a different awareness. And, sometimes, you think, people say, oh, time heals all wounds. But in grief, the distance from the loss can often make it, more significant. I think about the fact that I'm 51. I will, likely live at least 20 more years. And, having to live without them, but just recently I was doing a documentary showing in a city I knew no one. And it was my first time doing it without, the support of my family surrounding me. And they were there with me. Yeah.
Yeah. And you could feel that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know it.
Yes. So we need to take our break, and when we come back, I want to mention that trailer, and, I'm right here, mama.com. So we'll be back in a moment.
Experience a different yet profound healing with Reconnective Healing. Includes yet expands beyond any and all known forms of energy healing. The Reconnective Healing spectrum is comprised of the full healing and evolutionary continuum of energy, light, and information. It allows for healings that are not just physical, not just mental, not just emotional, yet go beyond that to bring healing that includes the evolution of your very being and essence. Deborah Beauvais, trained and certified by world-renowned Dr. Eric Pearl, offers appointment hours at Seekonk Family Chiropractic in Seekonk, Massachusetts. For questions or to set up both distance or local sessions, call Deborah at 508-431-1959. Again, 508-431-1959. Or go to lovebyintuition.com. That's lovebyintuition.com.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to DreamVision7Radio.com.
After narrowly surviving the attack on Sandy Hook Elementary, first-grade teacher Caitlin Royd DeBellis was left searching for answers that would never come. Eventually, she chose to focus on questions that could be answered. How do I make sure this tragedy doesn't define us? How do we get our control back? Those two questions led her to found the 501c3 nonprofit organization Classes for Classes. When gifts poured into their classroom, she decided they would help someone else by paying it forward and being kind. This developed into a social network which allows K-8 classrooms to connect so that every student in the United States can learn these crucial lessons. Classes for Classes' mission is to build students' social-emotional intelligence by connecting them to care. All C4C projects are crowd-funded. Any teacher in the U.S. can visit classesforclasses.org. That's classes, 4, classes.org. Sign up today.
Delight your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids children's book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love Song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love Song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on CD Baby or iTunes.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
And this is a live show for anyone that would like to call in. Our number is 833-220-1200, 220-1200. Bob is in the house, and he'll be glad to put you right through. And if you have a question for Dr. B or myself, we would love to have you. I am with Dr. Cristi Bundukamara, and she, for short, she is Dr. B. She is a psychiatric nurse practitioner with a with a doctorate in education. She has started her own Mental Strong Academy, and that is her website, Mentally Strong Academy, just as it sounds.com. You can also find her on her website with her name, and Cristi is Cristi. And I'll spell her last name. It's B as in boy, U as in us, N as in Nancy, D as in dog, U as in us, K as in kind, A as in apple, M as in mother, A as in apple, R as in Rick, and A as in apple again.com. So would you like to share, because I really feel that many people are afraid to bring up the loved one's name when they're talking with, they don't know what to say or do, and they think that it's easier just not to bring it up. But we want to talk about, especially, with the kids that are around, they want to talk about their dad. They want to talk about their sister. They want to talk about their brother. So take a little minute, if you may, and tell us, a couple of things and their names, so that we can recognize that they are eternal souls.
Yeah, I love talking about my kids. I do suggest, if you have someone in your vicinity that, is dealing with grief, ask. I'd love to ask you about your son or, your husband, because, it depends on where they are in their journey of healing. And, it might not be a good day for it or right environment, but don't not talk about it, right? Like you said. And tell you, Johnny was very shy and quiet, very protective of his sisters. I think he still watches over them. And he was adopted in 2004, and passed away in 2005. And I think, there was part of me that had a lot of guilt because I felt like I didn't really get to know him. And I focused, he had two biological sisters that we also adopted that were, I was focusing on them. Let's get them counseling, this is their trauma. And it wasn't until I saw a medium most recently, about a year and a half ago, and I kind of asked that question, Johnny, do you feel like you were a part of the family? And he was able to say yes, and since then I've been able to connect with him. And then Reggie was my one that gave me the medical trauma. We talk about him as being like a bull in a china closet. This kid, his 17 years of life, he lived as much energy as a 100-year-old, right? He was nonstop. You just constantly moving, constantly being a part of things, just very social, very loving. My daughter, on the other hand, was kind of in the background. She was his, baby sister, 1 year apart. They were Irish twins. And her personality is very calm and content. She didn't work hard. She didn't play hard. She'd go and do things, but, she preferred going to the movies or going shopping. And my son, preferred, dirt bike racing. And I often, when I feel like I need energy, I think of Reggie, And when I feel like I need to calm down, I think of Maya.
I find that just so warming the heart, just the sharing and what you just said, where if you need to be calmed down, you go to Maya.
Yeah.
And how about your husband? Now, he had the same disease, correct?
Yeah. And so my son had it the worst as far as, like, traumatic presentation. But it is a disorder that causes atrophy in the brain, and with each generation it gets worse. And so my husband didn't know he had it. My husband's actually African, and it's considered a Japanese disorder. There's only like 3 families in the United States that have it. So very ultra rare. And it took them 4 years of seeing geneticists and doctors to find it in my son. And when they found it in my son, we knew it was genetic, and so we tested my daughter, who we thought for sure was negative, and she was positive, and myself and my husband came out positive. So that was in 2009, I think, about 2009. And my husband started showing symptoms around, 2015. And then he recently died. So it's about a 10-year, and that's what the research says as well, a 10-year progression and presentation till death. So my son's was just very traumatic. My daughter, she had her first seizure when she was 11, and she died at 21. My son had his first seizure at 6. He died at 17. My husband started showing symptoms at 45, and he passed at 55.
And is there anything in conventional medicine that they administer or anything to that effect?
No, it's in the genes, and the genes cause a toxic protein, and that toxic protein eats away at the brain cells. And so there's nothing, there's no even research that's close to finding a treatment.
Wow. Yeah. So shifting from, and I thank you for sharing each of them, let's talk about how you help others. And when you're helping others, naturally, you're helping to heal yourself and telling your story, because I think the more that we share the story when in the earlier time and beyond that, and then even writing about it, it's a huge healing. It never, I think one of the things I think we were reading or said in an email that, does grief ever end? I don't think it does. I don't think it passes. If it does, I think it's the kind of relationship one has had, like maybe it's a friendship relationship, or everyone has a different kind of relationship. You could line up a dozen people, and they have different grief for different reasons. But anyhow, where am I going with this, Dr. B?
Well, how I'm helping people. So I knew when Reggie died that I had to share just how I was actually functioning, because the previous 10 years was very traumatic. Like, we thought we were going to lose him on a regular basis. And so when we
living
actually
with that
lost
trauma.
him, right.
That's a trauma, just living with that and back and forth. And, we all know what it's like in the hospital, where you can spend, 12 hours easily. Just in the ER.
So I immediately started my book that I now call Pain and Purpose, and started getting in writing what I call the Mentally Strong Method, which is a way in which you can think through your problems, organize them, and make choices in line with what you want. And it took a couple years, and then we started the clinic where I could share those things. The clinic is a place where, we take insurance. We're local. We are in Colorado Springs. And then we started the Mentally Strong Academy, which goes into education and teaching, and you can take courses online for the Mentally Strong method. I have a free grief course on the website. The website is actually just mentallystrong.com now, so that we just try to make it shorter. So mentallystrong.com, you can see the books that I've written, the free grief course. We also have the Mentally Strong Method course, which, if you needed intense intervention, which oftentimes mothers do, we will be having our first grief intensive in January of 25. And so just helping other people through this process and the spiritual journey that comes with it. I think one of the things that make people get stuck is that they are not willing to question, maybe their doctrinal beliefs or what they were taught. And I basically say, just like Carl Jung was asked, after all of this brain research, do you still believe in God? And I have the same answer. I used to believe in God. Now I know God. And when people are going through a grief process, I challenge them to know God personally. So starting from scratch, and we often start our spiritual relationships with our, cultural upbringing and, what we were taught by others. And unless your pastor has also lost a child, they probably don't know how to help you through that process. Right. And oftentimes people in those sectors will say things that, minimize the pain, and so just really working on a genuine, authentic relationship yourself.
Right. And you can have the most beautiful, the most revered type of relationship with God, Creator, Jesus, everything. You can have that, and it brings a softness. It brings a softness where you know that you're not alone, even though you may walk alone. You have that foundation, and that there's more to walking the earth. Yeah. So let's talk about your trailer that you have. It is a documentary. It's I'mRightHereMama.com. Tell us about that and what you hope and believe it to be throughout this world we live in.
Yeah. So I think we need to start talking about grief. I think we need to stop separating our spiritual health from our mental health. There's a, strong overlapping between our spiritual health and our mental health. And this documentary is about the conversation of grief, death, spiritual walk, and, bringing that to the forefront of, we need to talk about grief. And especially, it's obviously especially comforting for someone who has lost a child to see what I went through, the things that I did to heal, and where I am today. And so as far as, a specific audience, it's to help people who have lost a child or had other traumatic grief. But the documentary itself is about bringing awareness to grief, and that this grief theory that everybody learns is not true.
Right. So if anyone listening knows of, different states, different towns that may, you share with them, Dr. B, what your hopes are for this documentary.
So we're going on a film festival run. So if you have a film festival that you think it would be good in, if you have a corporate sponsor, we would love for like a business to sponsor a showing, rent out a theater, bring me in, show the film. I answer questions after, pair up with, maybe mental health or grief organizations so that they can bring in people who may need to see it. So we are hoping to show this film all over the country and eventually all over the world.
Yes.
And the way that I developed the idea of the documentary is, like I said, the shock of my daughter's death. Here I am. I'm 5 years after my son's death. I'm already a grief expert. I'm doing these YouTube videos. I'm teaching about grief all the time. And I lose my daughter, and I go into a shock mode. And I realized about 6 months after her death, oh my God, I have not even began to grieve. And I realized, so, a lot of people have like their favorite number. We have the number 45 as it's the family number. It was my husband's football number in college. It's in every password that we have. It's just, everybody knows 45 is our family number. And when I realized I had not grieved for Maya, I was looking for like a time to like just specifically grieve. And I realized there was exactly 45 days between the anniversary of my son's death and the anniversary of my daughter's death. And I knew at that moment that was sacred time. And so I bought a GoPro, and I ended up writing a book during that 45 days because I was working on things, and as I was working on myself, I was creating these worksheets, for how to work through grief. And I came out of that 45 days with all of this film, and then I had to find an editor and a director, and so it took another year to produce the film. But it goes through not just my story of losing my children, but the actual ugliness of grieving. Like, what does that actually look like?
Right. Yeah, and I think it's important to see that because there are those, unfortunately, everyone's going to have a loss, if they live long enough on the earth. But many people don't realize the depth, how that every part of you, every piece of your skin is in pain, physical pain. They don't realize those types of things. And I think that's the more people that understand that, the more we'll open up conversations that it's okay to talk about grief. It's okay to talk about the person that is still visiting you, but may not be there in the physical. It's okay. It's okay. It's all part of life. It just is the cycle of life. But we need to take our last break. Everyone, stay with us. Again, the number, there's still time, but hurry, 833-220-1200.
Take a journey to a place of the divine love within with Deborah Beauvais on the Love by Intuition Show, Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. Eastern. Our message is love in the purest form. The light within us all is a guide to recall our beginning, to learn to love self and humankind, and to feel the higher power of our own divinity. To attract love, one needs to be loved. Come join us and step into this glorious vibration called love.
Delight your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids Children's Book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love Song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love Song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on Feedy Baby or iTunes.
Are miracles real? Can you move from mayhem to miracles? 30 prominent authors say yes as they share their high fives and down lows of challenges, abuse, addiction, and love. Experience hope, the magic elixir of miracles, through the personal stories of New York Times best-selling authors James Redfield, Dr. Bernie Siegel, Sister Jenna, Reverend Temple Hayes, and many more. If you like bestsellers, chaos to clarity, and crappy to happy, you'll love crying and laughing through mayhem to miracles. Sacred Stories of Transformational Hope. Available now on Amazon and in bookstores worldwide.
It's a child's job to play, to learn, and to have fun. It's an adult's job to keep them safe. Did you know that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused before the age of 18? Every day, families enter the Children's Advocacy Center because a child's courage to tell someone what happened to them. Keeping our children safe starts with a conversation. This is Michelle Aranger, Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Center. Learn more on how to keep your child safe. Visit cacofbc.org. This message made possible by the Fall River Rotary Club.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
And we are back. Dr. B, if you would like, and I would like, you could tell and share the 3 profound lessons. The anger is not the real issue, and then the seek support and take time to feel the pain. Could you address each one of those a bit?
Yeah. So anger is always a secondary emotion, and that's really hard for people to dig deeper into because, you know, when something traumatic has happened, especially, you know, something you feel is unfair, right, unjust, you feel like you have a right to be angry at God. And, you know, what if it was, you know, that the loss was specifically from someone? Let's say it was a murder or, you know, a hospital mistake that caused this person's death, right? When you can place a blame, it's the anger feels justified, right? And, you know, when we talk about the Mentally Strong Method, we put things into different categories because it all gets enmeshed with your grief, right? And so we have to put those things in the injustice. If it's rightful anger, right, it goes in the injustice category because, unfortunately, there's only a few things that we have control of in this life. And unfortunately, injustices is not one of them. And so there are things that you can do about injustice, but you can't change what has happened.
Right.
You can change how you talk about it, how you think about it, and how you grieve, right? And so, again, we can't talk about we can't talk about grief without talking about your spiritual belief system because that's what grief is, right? Something is gone into this eternity that you don't have a direct connection with, and you are feeling pain because of that. And so putting the injustice in its category, putting spiritual conflict in its own category, so that when you grieve, you are really when I say you have to feel to heal, I don't want you to relive your trauma, right? Because that's rumination, and that creates more trauma. So we have to separate that trauma and say, okay, the trauma's over here. The trauma we need to process and let go. Grief we process and cherish. And so putting the anger in the right category of either injustice, negative talk or trauma, but grief is not anger. Spiritual conflict is anger. And so that you can actually grieve and feel the pain of losing that person, and then maybe being able to work through the spiritual conflict and have some sort of eternal connection with that person. But when you go to other people, and this happens often, let's say you go to your pastor, or you go to a medium, or you go to someone else to tell you what that connection should be, it's not your connection. Right. And so, even though going to a medium was part of my healing process, just going to the medium did nothing for that grief. Like it for me, it allowed me to confirm some things that I was already experiencing. Mm-hmm. But I often hear people, like, they'll go to a medium, and that medium will connect with their loved one, and they feel good for a couple of days. Right. Then it's like it was that medium's connection, not yours. And so learning that insight for yourself and growing in that piece, but we got to separate these pieces first. Because oftentimes I'll say, well, you have to feel the pain to heal. And then when they tell me what they're feeling, it's actually the trauma. And I'm like, right, that's not grief, that's trauma. And when you re-feel trauma, you're re-traumatizing yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautifully said. I like the idea of the categories and separating each one. And really honing in to have your own experience. And things on the outside, like the medium, can help, but it's all about your own experience.
Right.
And putting everything in its box. I used to say, put that in the box. Have different boxes, but the category makes more sense.
Yeah.
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 So, yeah. And I like the way you point out to the difference from the trauma and the grief. Not everyone talks about that they're actually two separate things. And you cleared that up beautifully. So it's good. Good information for those that are listening and for those that will pass the show around, and it just keeps going from there. We only have a few minutes left. What do you want to leave the listeners with, and what do you need? What do you need right now?
I could use some ambassadors that want to see the film in places, right, and maybe have some connections. But I'd really like to say, I know there's someone listening who has lost a child, and they feel like they're never going to find that happiness or that joy. Do not give up on life. There's a reason that you are here. And reach out to us, mentallystrong.com. We have a Grieve with Purpose Facebook group as well, and then lots of free resources. But, I want to help people through this process.
And that's global.
Yes.
One doesn't have to be in Colorado.
Correct.
Yes. So it's mentallystrong.com is the easiest way to connect with Dr. B.
Yes.
And is there anything else that is on your heart?
No, I appreciate the time, and I love telling my story.
We love hearing it. So thank you for that. So everyone listening, thank you so much, first of all, Dr. B. It's been an honor, as mentioned, and I thank you for all the work you're doing. And most likely, when it touches my heart, I'll have you back sometime in the future. Mm-hmm. So thank you for gracing our airwaves. And for everyone listening, pass it on, listen to it again, because there's a tidbit in there, a different one each time you listen that can help you along your journey. Check out Dr. B's website if you are looking or know someone in the family that needs to have some support in some fashion. You can you go on her site and actually sign up for the Facebook community and different things of that sort. So until we come together again in love, self-love, love all, unity, consciousness, all of it, we are powerful when we are together. And so until we meet again, au revoir.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Are you seeking a clearer path to love? Then tune in to the Love by Intuition show next week. All designed to your highest good. To contact Deborah Beauvais, owner of Empowered Connections, call her at 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or link on to lovebyintuition.com. Remember, we are all one, and we are all part of the miracle of love.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.